Hey everyone, it's Carissa at Sprinkled with Glitter. Thanks for stopping by today. Today I'm going to create a couple of cards using some new products from the Simon Says Stamp Believe in the Season release. I love this stamp set. That one over there on the left is called the Magical Christmas Stamp Set. This one here on the right is called the Christmas Essentials Stamp Set. And these coordinate so beautifully because the font on the bear is the same as that Merry Christmas and the Christmas Essentials. And then the font that's contained within the reindeer is also the same font as one of those little stamps over there. So they coordinate beautifully. Now I also have this patent ornament here. I wanted to show you how this cuts because it's almost like a partial die cut type die. It cuts this kind of half ornament. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it cuts most of the way. It didn't cut all the way to the edge of my card because I was using this lengthwise, but you can see I just finished out the cut there with my trimmer. And then I have these two pieces that I can either use that left side by itself, or I can kind of nest these together and kind of create a really cool card using those. Now, there's also this new snow globe landscape die here, and I'm just showing you how this cuts. It cuts not only the landscape with that snow globe kind of sticking up from it, but also the piece that goes along the bottom of the snow globe, which would normally be like, I don't know, like a wood base piece or a metal base piece. So you could create some really fun cards with that, and I think you could almost use it kind of in reverse as a really cool shaker card idea. But for today's cards, I'm starting out with my new favorite dies. These are My Favorite Things wonky stitched oval dies. I've been using them a lot, I know, but when I get a new basic shape, I tend to use it over and over again. And I love these because they have that stitching around the edge. So what I'm doing here is I've cut that oval out of some Neenah Solar White, and now I'm taking this really fine script stamp. This is from the Christmas Essentials stamp set, and I am going to stamp it repeatedly over the background of this oval. So what I'm doing is I'm starting in the center of the oval. I'm going to stamp that down, and then I'm going to ink up my stamp again, and I'm going to move it above and kind of stagger it to the right side and then stagger it to the left side. So I kind of built it up almost like you would lay brickwork. So one in the center and then two each side and then kind of in the center again. So that's kind of how I created the background for these. So now that I have my background stamped, I'm going to go ahead and stamp my focal images, and I'm stamping the deer first. I wanted to add a little bit of clear embossing powder over the top of these stamped images. So what I've done is I have just inked up my stamp using my Versamark ink first, and then before I even stamp it onto the paper, I'm going to ink right over that Versamark ink with my Hero Art Strawberry Hybrid ink pad, and then I'm going to just press it on to this Neenah Solar White cardstock. That Versamark ink is going to stay wet enough there so that I can apply my clear embossing powder over this stamped image. And that clear embossing powder is going to give it a little bit of shine, and it kind of almost intensifies the dye ink a little bit by adding that shine. Now, I love this shade of red. It is like a very true red. And I wanted to use a true red because I want to keep the card feeling a little bit more contemporary. If you wanted it to have a more traditional feel, you might try something like more of a maroon red. But in this case, I wanted that really contemporary feel. So I'm going to do the same thing with the bear, and inside the bear there is this Merry Christmas script sentiment. There is also in this new release a coordinating die. It's kind of the same script, Merry Christmas. It's a die cut though, and I think it is so cool. So you may want to check that out, and I will have a link to this entire release in the description at YouTube as well as over at my blog. But for this bear, I went ahead and used the Hero Arts green ombre ink pad. I inked it with my Versamark ink first. I put the ombre ink pad on there. I kind of cha-cha'd or moved the ink pad back and forth just a tad bit so that I could keep it from having harsh lines. And you see here, I kind of did not ink up one part of the stamp very well, so I just took a little piece of a makeup sponge, just one of those really cheap Target makeup wedges. I don't use these on my face. I only use them on crafting projects. But I went ahead and filled in some extra ink there. I added my embossing powder over the top, and then I heat set those. Now, in this release, there are coordinating dies for these images. I just didn't have them. So I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way today, and I am going to use my scissors to fussy cut these images. You can see as I fussy cut there, I am just turning the paper. I don't really move my scissors very much. I do a lot of the moving with the paper, and that gives me a nice clean cut. So now I am going to stamp my sentiment. This says Blessed Christmas, and I am using the Altenew Lava Rock dye ink for this. I thought a more intense but still warm feeling gray would be a really great complement to the background that I already stamped using the Altenew. I believe it was the Evening Gray was what I used on the background of these. And so I'm just stamping this a couple of times. I inked it up with some Versamark ink, not because I'm going to emboss it, but because I found these are new stamps and they're not quite seasoned or broken yet. So I'm just adding a little Versamark ink over the top of these. I'm wiping it off with my finger and then inking it up with my dye ink. And that gets me a really good impression because these stamps aren't quite seasoned yet. So when I'm stamping images over and over again, and you're seeing me do this here, I actually stamp extras because then I just pick the two best ones. I don't always stamp everything perfectly on the first try. Don't live under that assumption. I am not perfect. I get to edit out a lot of my boo-boos, but I do like to stamp some things a few times, and that way I can pick my best stamped impressions, and I'm fussy cutting those out now. And I'm going to add foam adhesive on the back of my focal images as well as on the back of my banner sentiments here. So on the portions where my banner sentiments are going to overlap my focal images, it doesn't do it on the bear shape, but on this deer or this reindeer shape. It's not a reindeer, it's a deer, right? I don't think the antlers are thick enough for it to be a reindeer. I think it's just a regular deer, but I don't know. You can tell me. Leave it in the comments below. We'll take a vote. So anyway, on the portions where the banner is going to overlap the deer, I'm only going to use one layer of foam adhesive. But on the other portions where it's going to be on the oval shape, I'm going to use 2 layers of foam adhesive, and that keeps it nice and even across that oval because there's already a layer of foam adhesive on the back of the deer. So now that I have all of my pieces ready to assemble, I'm going to work on my card bases. And for my card bases today, I'm using a little bit of linen cardstock. I just find on these cards that I keep really kind of with a lot of white space that this white linen texture adds a lot of interest to the cards. It just keeps it from falling too flat, I guess. And on these card bases, I'm going to use that border stamp that is in the Magical Christmas stamp set. It's kind of, I don't know, maybe like a little tribal or a little Nordic or maybe a little mixture of both, but I'm going to stamp it onto these card bases. So my card bases are cut to 4 1/4 by 11, and then I've scored them at 5 1/2 inches, and then I've placed them into my Mini Misty and they're folded. And so I have those couple of magnets down there to keep that folded and flat while I stamp on top. And I'm going to use the same inks that I used to stamp my focal images. So on this first one, I'm using a little bit of the Hero Art Strawberry Hybrid ink. And you can see I grabbed my washcloth there. I kind of keep this dry cloth in my craft room just to kind of clean up things. But I used it on the back of my hand so that I could slide my hand across the lid of my Misty. I didn't have long sleeves on today. Otherwise, I would have just pulled my sleeve down over the heel of my hand. But in today's case, I just grabbed that dry cloth and kind of rubbed all over that to make sure I got a really good impression. Now, you saw me earlier ink that up with a little Versamark ink. Once again, my stamp was not prepped or seasoned, so I prepped it with the Versamark ink to get a better impression. Now for this border, I am going to use the Hero Arts Green Ombre ink pad. And so you saw me ink it up there in the center, and then I flipped my ombre ink pad around so that the lightest color would line up with the lightest color that I stamped before. And then I moved to the bottom and I flipped my ink pad around again so that the dark part of the ink pad would butt up against the dark part where I inked it up before. And that keeps any cross-contamination from happening. I don't want to get any of the dark ink on my light ink pad. So by flipping that around and making sure I was putting light against the light and the dark against the dark, I prevented my ink pad from getting contaminated and just kind of continued that ombre look up that border stamp there. So I decided for these, I would go ahead and do these on the opposites. I thought maybe I would use the same color on the background that I used on my focal images, but I decided to go ahead and flip-flop that. And at this point, I thought I might do something different with that deer one. So you can see it in the upper right-hand corner. I ended up doing the same thing with it. But if you want to try something different, you absolutely can. So now it's just a matter of assembling all these pieces. I have foam adhesive on the back of my oval. I've placed that onto my card front, kind of in the lower right-hand portion of the card front. I've removed the backer from the foam adhesive on the bear and placed him down, and then also on my banner as well. Now I did have to add a little layer of extra foam adhesive on that end of the banner that hangs off of the oval so that it would sit nice and flat across the card front. And when I looked at these, I felt like they just needed a little greenery. There's something about me and Christmas that if there's not greenery or holly, that it just doesn't feel complete. So I took a couple of these die cut boughs. These are from the Concord and Ninth Take a Bough die. And they cut these really cool pine boughs that you can make a tree with. But I've cut those in half and I've just kind of tucked them in behind my focal image so you can see it kind of coming out from the left side of the deer there and then from the bottom of that banner on the bear card. I've tucked those in, I've attached them with some liquid glue, and then I've added a little bit of red and white baker's twine bows to those groupings of the boughs. And then I am adding some sparkling clear sequins on the front of these cards as well. Now for the deer card, I went ahead and finished it off with these adorable little mini jingle bells because what is a deer and some greenery without a couple little gold jingle bells? It just doesn't feel like Christmas, right? So here's a final look back at the cards that I created today using some new products from the Simon Says Stamp Believe in the Season release. As always, I will have links to all the products used in these projects over at my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com, where you can see more still shots and find more information as well. And I will have links to the featured products in the description at YouTube, as well as a link to the blog posts for these projects. Thanks for stopping by today. I really hope you enjoyed these projects. If you did, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe because I have been posting videos like crazy lately. If you haven't seen those, be sure to go back and check them out. As always, thanks for watching. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.